Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina. I am one of the lead faculty in our Modern Management of the Older Adult Geriatric Division. In our CERT MMOA, which is our comprehensive geriatric curriculum, we have 3 courses. We have our 8-week online essential foundations that our last cohort until August just started last week. If you have taken essential foundations, we have our 8-week online advanced concepts course that starts this week. It starts tomorrow. And so this is your final chance to jump in. And then we have our 2-day live course where we are all over the country talking about how to give your older adults the care that they so desperately deserve. Our next 2 courses are, we actually have a double header coming up May 20th and 21st. We're going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well as Simi Valley, California. And so if you are in that area of the country and you are interested in leveling up your Jerry game, I encourage you to take a look and sign up for those courses. Today, we're going to be talking a bit about prevention and pre-frailty in particular. I posted on Instagram a couple of days ago that a publication that myself and my supervisor for my PhD worked on came out in topics in geriatric rehabilitation. I was absolutely blown away. I said to individuals, if you wanted the PDF, you could send me a message. And I have been sending out hundreds of emails, which is amazing to see so many clinicians interested in figuring out how to better serve their older adults. In today's podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit about what pre-frailty is, why it matters, how we can measure it, and what we can do about it. We're going to kind of go through like the what, why, how, and rehab interventions of pre-frailty. Pre-frailty is a subclinical state of frailty. Frailty is a clinical geriatric syndrome, which is marked by an older adult's vulnerability to external stress. It is a purposefully vague definition because there is constellations of signs and symptoms that create this syndrome that leads our older adults to be at risk for adverse health outcomes. Clinical geriatric syndromes are actually really wonderful within the space of geriatrics because when we are dealing with individuals with multiple health complexities, it can be hard to pinpoint the exact kind of I don't want to say over medicalization, but it'll be hard for us to figure out the exact deficit potentially that is leading to a person's lack of physical function. And so an example, if you have a person who has diabetes, is on multiple cardiovascular meds, has been diagnosed with CHF, is also dealing with some neuropathies, has chronic pain, has had multiple orthopedic surgeries, and they're coming in with almost like this failure to thrive or this lack of physical resiliency. If we map them across the frailty spectrum, we can really be focusing on the key point, which is their lack of physical function, and put it through the filter of medical complexities to make sure that we are monitoring and supervising our interventions appropriately. So when we're thinking about frailty, we have individuals who are over the age of 65 who would be considered robust, who are very far away from that frail category. We have individuals who are in this pre-frail category that are showing some subclinical amounts of impairment, but haven't necessarily crossed that threshold into a true vulnerability. And then we have individuals who are frail. And when we're thinking about pre-frailty, we're kind of thinking in this space of prevention. Individuals with pre-frailty are going to have diagnosed complexities, but in general are doing a little bit better from a physical function perspective than those who are further along the frailty continuum. Why this matters is when we look at adverse health outcomes like all-cause mortality, length of stay in hospital, COVID-19 infection rates, et cetera, we almost see this like stepwise progression or increase in risk, where individuals who are robust have the lowest risk category and their odds ratio is kind of that 1.0. And then it creeps up for pre-frailty and creeps up even farther with frailty. This has become really relevant in our healthcare conversations because we're seeing this same stepwise increase pattern when it comes to healthcare utilization as well. We see individuals who are pre-frail tend to use more healthcare resources, whether that's acute hospitalization or need for specialized care, than those who are robust. And those who are frail see a stepwise increase from those who are pre-frail. And there's quite a big difference between individuals who are frail at the same age category than those that are robust. So it becomes a really important business conversation as well. As a physical therapist and as individuals in rehab, so our occupational therapists, all of us on the rehab team, it's important to acknowledge that 50% of our older adults living in the community, so these are our clients that are coming into outpatient orthopedic clinics, have at least one marker of pre-frailty. And the most predominant factor is muscular weakness. It is usually one of the first, or it is the first marker to show up, where our older adults are presenting with clinically relevant amounts of muscular weakness that we can confidently say that it is impairing their capacity to complete activities of daily living. It is also a very good reason for our older adults to be seeking rehab and is a big proponent of what we talk about within MMOA about making sure that we are dosing our exercise programs, specifically our resistance training, appropriately in order to circumvent or improve clinically relevant weakness so that they get out of that pre-frail category. In order for us to be able to confidently talk about pre-frailty, we need to be able to measure it. And so in our narrative review, we did two things that we were hoping to help guide clinicians with the most. One is to do a review of all of the outcome measures that we have seen in the research that have looked at frailty and have a known cutoff score for pre-frailty, because some of these outcome measures were developed when we didn't have as much nuance in this conversation, and so we don't have a known cutoff score for pre-frailty. So we tried to outline that. We wanted to outline how long it took for clinicians to be able to do these tests and what they would need in order for them to be able to do this in their clinics. And then after we have a marker or a way to mark where a person is across the frailty spectrum, then from there we need to know what to do about it. And so we did a brief review, kind of a scoping review of some of the literature specifically in pre-frailty, and we broke it down into our exercise interventions and some of our additional interventions such as nutrition. And so we'll go into those. So when we're looking at outcome measures, if you have taken MMOA, you know that we heavily leverage the physical phenotype of frailty. And the reason why we do that is because we are already measuring all of the things that are encapsulated within this framework. So Linda Fried in 2001 talked about how when there are 5 physical attributes that contribute or seem to be present in individuals who have physical frailty. And those are physical inactivity, slow gait speed, muscular weakness, fatigue and lethargy, and unexplained weight loss. And we ask about individuals' activity levels. We ask about any changes in weight. We take measures of muscular weakness. We measure gait speed, and we ask about energy in all of our assessments. And so it's very easy for us to take the information that we're already gathering and place a person across the frailty spectrum. And so if a person has 1 or 2 of these 5 physical attributes, they're considered to be pre-frail. Another outcome measure that is utilized very heavily is the frailty index. And that is because it is taking information that we are capturing when a person comes into hospital from a medical chart review perspective, and then looking at the number of questions that a person said yes to and dividing it by the number of questions we asked in total. So some of these questions are, have you ever been diagnosed with hypertension? Have you ever been diagnosed with a cognitive issue? Do you have difficulties with activities of daily living? Do you have difficulties getting around your house? And if you say yes, then you get a check mark. And if you say no, it's a 0. And so you add up the ones over the total number of questions and you get an index on 0 to 1. And so over 0.25, if you answer yes to 25% of the questions that they're being asked in this medical chart review, and every one is a little bit different, it's not a standardized set of questions, then you're considered to be frail. And if you're at 0.13 to 0.25, we have some indication of pre-frailty. And so a lot of hospital networks will use that because they're just going to use an algorithm or use a kind of a formula within the medical chart that is going to be able to pop out that number. The hard part with the frailty index is that it's not amenable that much to change with intervention, except for, some of the activity of daily living questions. Have you ever been diagnosed with hypertension isn't going to turn to a no, even if you maybe get off blood pressure meds or it's better regulated with physical inactivity and lifestyle related factors and is relying less heavily on medical management. I'm going to go through 5 or 6 other outcome measures. So we have the study of osteoporotic fractures. This is a self-report measure. It asks about your capacity for your level of fatigue and lethargy, if you've had any unexplained weight loss, and then after that self-report, you're going to do a 5 times sit to stand. And if one of any of these 3 hit relevant cutoff scores, then you're going to be considered to have pre-frailty. Another one that we use a lot in clinic is the clinical frailty scale, and it's because this is based on a person's clinical impression. What I mean by that is you're going to go through your assessment as per usual. You're going to do all of your subjective, objective measures, and then at the end of that evaluation, you're going to mark a person based on what you have seen across the entire evaluation on a scale of 1, which is very fit, to 9, which is terminally ill. Pre-frailty is an individual who is at 4 or 5 across that 9-point spectrum, and individuals who are in the 6+ are in that frail category. A lot of our physicians like this outcome as well because they often will say, well, I don't really need to know or use an objective measure for a person with frailty. I already know what they are when they're walking in our door. And when it comes to pre-frailty, it's a little bit more nuanced. So the only thing with the clinical frailty scale is that our new learners tend to have less accuracy mapping a person on the clinical frailty scale to some of our more experienced clinicians. This is a learning effect. And so not to say to not use it with our new learners, but just to recognize that there's going to be a bit more variability with our younger learners than some of our more seasoned clinicians. So just something to consider. Those are probably some of the most prevalent, but if you want to go through this review, there are 8 or 9 different outcome measures that you can see which one works best for your flow of your assessment and then can work from there. When it comes to intervention, this is where I get really fired up because we have a huge role to play when it comes to managing pre-frailty and getting into this prevention space for our older adults. The problem is that rehab is very commonly not at the table with these discussions, and there's a lot of work that we can do to advocate for our role. When it comes to the subgrouping of interventions that have the most amount of evidence, 3 out of 4 of the interventions are movement focused, and therefore rehab definitely should be at the forefront of these types of interventions to make sure that they are done with keeping in mind the medical complexities of individuals who are moving along the frailty spectrum. Where we have evidence is around resistance training, exergaming, multi-component programs that do have a resistance training component, and nutritional interventions. When it comes to resistance training, many of our systematic reviews have a wide swing with respect to dose response, right? 1 to 3 sets, 6 to 15 repetitions at intensities between 30 and 70% of 1 rep max. Our low intensity programs are more prevalent in the literature, and we currently do not have a lot of high load, high intensity programs with individuals with frailty. My PhD worked to change that and look at safety and feasibility of approaching 5 repetitions and less in individuals with pre-frailty, and we were able to show that it was safe and feasible, but that evidence hasn't been published yet, and so we have to go with the literature that we have. When we are looking at resistance training, if we have individuals who are previously inactive and we put them on a resistance training program of any intensity, we're going to see initial improvements, which is what has been seen in these studies that compare exercise intervention to no activity controls. It's important to note that with low intensity programs, we are still trying to hit that intensity of 60 to 70%, but we are doing this in ways that often involve things like TheraBand or things like chair-focused programs. Especially for individuals with pre-frailty, they are probably going to be at least limited community ambulators, and so we want to make sure that we are hitting an intensity that's going to drive changes for them. Finally, the last thing that was highlighted in this paper, and you can kind of go through all of the different interventions, but malnutrition is a really important part of the frailty spectrum and is a important component for us to be conceptualizing when it comes to our interventions. But usually nutritional interventions on their own seem to not hit the mark of changing physical function. And anyone in this strength conditioning space, this makes a lot of sense. If we are increasing a person's protein intake, but they're not doing anything that requires an increase in protein utilization, we're not going to see a compounding effect when we're just thinking about protein in isolation. But the sweet spot seems to be to make sure that our older adults are hitting at least 0.8 to ideally 1.0 grams per kilo of body weight per day. And doing that in combination with an appropriately dosed resistance training program. That legitimately is the sweet spot for everyone when it comes to our interventions and what we should be really focusing on, especially for our older adults who tend to be a lot lower on the protein consumption piece, because it is going to just leaps and bounds the effectiveness of our interventions when we're making sure that a person is appropriately fueled. All right, if you are interested in this study, this narrative review, this was not a research study, but it was a clinical review, please let me know. I love sending research out to individuals to try and keep our profession as evidence informed as we can. Exciting that Topics in Geriatric Rehabilitation let us work on this review to try and help clinicians in this space. And I can't wait to continue having some of these conversations with high load resistance training for at-risk older adults. If you are interested in learning more, our MMOA digest goes out on Friday, and this paper will be included in that digest. So you can go to ptonice.com/resources and it will be available for you there. All right, have a great week, everyone, and I can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.